Good morning. Thank you so much for joining us on this amazing summer day. Indeed, the last Sunday of summer. Time just flies by when you're having a good time, I guess. But for the next 45 minutes or so, it's a golden opportunity for us to just take a deep breath and go beyond time, forget about our busy schedules, and just try to connect with something that's a little more real than time. So welcome. Welcome to this congregation where for over half a century, we have been seeking to foster community, to grow our spirits, to serve others, and to work for justice. We're very glad that you've joined us this morning in our sacred cyberspace and hope that here you will experience love, acceptance, and hopefully be inspired. After our service, please feel free to stick around for some fellowship and some conversation. Our monthly touchstone themes strive to help us shape our days and guide our journeys. This year's overarching theme is repairing the world. And our September topic is reason. With racism, poverty, climate change, and injustice, the world needs our help and compassion. In academic fields like science, philosophy, law, and so many other fields found in the real world, reason has been and is a powerful tool in the search for truth and the accumulation of wisdom. Yet, given fake news, alternative facts, falsehoods, conspiracy theories, and deception, reason is under assault from many places. Our speaker today is the Reverend Libby Smith, who I'm sure you all know and love, and she is delighted to come back to our congregation, where she had the honor of serving as our minister from 2007 to 2013. Ordained in 1992, she also served congregations in Rockport, Massachusetts, and Warrington, Pennsylvania, and spent 5 years as chaplain at the Unitarian Universalist House Retirement Home in Philadelphia. Now retired from congregational service, she enjoys the chance to do pulpit supply and rites of passage on request. The title of her sermon today is The New Normal. Lately, there's been a lot of talk about life getting back to normal. But perhaps we need the courage and imagination to imagine something better than normal. We've learned and grown and changed during the challenges of the past year and a half. Why not go forward instead of back? Now, let us enter into worship together. Our prelude this morning is by our awesome musician, Avi Wisnia, who'll be singing a song that we all know and love.
Enter, rejoice, and come in. Enter, rejoice, and come in. Today will be a joyful day. Enter, rejoice, and come in. Open your ears to the song. Open your ears to the song. Today will be a joyful day. Enter, rejoice, and come in. Open your hearts, everyone. Open your hearts, everyone. Today will be a joyful day. Enter, rejoice, and come in. Don't be afraid of some change. Don't be afraid of some change. Today will be a joyful day. Enter, rejoice, and come in. Enter, rejoice, and come in. Enter, rejoice, and come in. Today will be a joyful day. Enter, rejoice, and come in.
Thank you, Avi. If you haven't had your coffee yet, that song probably did the trick. Please feel free to join me as I read our lighting the chalice words. As we light this chalice, may all who gather here be filled with joy and hope, and filled with compassion and love. Our opening words this morning are from Pope John Paul II. Faith and reason are like two wings of the human spirit by which it soars to the truth. Our story for all ages this morning was handpicked for us by Reverend Libby, and it's a good one.
Hello, little readers. Today we're going to read, What do you do with an idea? One day I had an idea. Where did it come from? Why is it here, I wondered. What do you do with an idea? At first, I didn't think much of it. It seemed kind of strange and fragile. I didn't know what to do with it. So I just walked away from it. I acted like it didn't belong to me. But it followed me. I worried what others would think. What would people say about my idea? I kept it to myself. I hid it away and didn't talk about it. I tried to act like everything was the same as it was before my idea showed up. But there was something magical about my idea. I had to admit, I felt better and happier when it was around. It wanted food. It wanted to play. Actually, it wanted a lot of attention. It grew bigger, and we became friends. I showed it to other people even though I was afraid of what they would say. I was afraid that if people saw it, they would laugh at it. I was afraid they would think it was silly. And many of them did. They said it was no good. They said it was too weird. They said it was a waste of time and that it would never become anything. And at first, I believed them. I actually thought about giving up on my idea. I almost listened to them. But then I realized, what do they really know? This is my idea, I thought. No one knows it like I do. And it's okay if it's different and weird, and maybe a little crazy. I decided to protect it, to care for it. I fed it good food. I worked with it. I played with it. But most of all, I gave it my attention. My idea grew and grew, and so did my love for it. I built it a new house, one with an open roof where it could look up at the stars, a place where it could be safe to dream. I liked being with my idea. It made me feel more alive, like I could do anything. It encouraged me to think big, and then to think bigger. It shared its secrets with me. It showed me how to walk on my hands. Because, it said, it is good to have the ability to see things differently. I couldn't imagine my life without it. Then one day, something amazing happened. My idea changed right before my very eyes. It spread its wings, took flight, and burst into the sky. I don't know how to describe it, but it went from being here to being everywhere. It wasn't just a part of me anymore. It was now a part of everything. And then I realized what you do with an idea. You change the world. The end.
What a great story. I'm sure we've all had an idea that seemed to have a life of its own. For our interlude this morning, Avi will sing a song about a day just like today.
Do you remember when you pushed your dreams aside? The road became so narrow, it used to seem so wide. Afraid of what they'd say, afraid to lose it all. You kept it all inside these blue sky painted walls. But where was I when you decided on a day just like today? Maybe we could see a change. It doesn't have to be the same as it's always been. We've still gotta write the rest of our history. We can't look the other way on a day just like today. Your eyes are telling me the things you haven't said. Should I just pretend that maybe it's all for the best? If you traded in your flower for something watered down, what better time to decide it on a day just like today? Maybe we can see a change. It doesn't have to be the same as it's always been. We've still gotta write the rest of our history. We can't look the other way on a day just like today. Maybe we can see a change. It doesn't have to be the same as it's always been. We've still gotta write the rest of our history.
Thank you, Avi. That was beautiful. Now it is my extreme pleasure to introduce our speaker today, Reverend Libby Smith, for her reading.
Thank you, Gil, and thank you, Avi. What a perfect song for this service. It doesn't have to be the way it's always been. That's exactly what I'm talking about. The reading this morning comes from the poet and activist Sonia Renee Taylor, who wrote, "We will not go back to normal. Normal never was. Our pre-corona existence was not normal, other than we normalized greed, inequality, exhaustion, depletion, extraction, disconnection, confusion, rage, hoarding, hate, and lack. We should not long to return, my friends. We are being given the opportunity to stitch a new garment, one that fits all of humanity and nature."
Thank you, Libby. That was very nice, thought-provoking. For our offertory today, the split plate recipient for the month of September is the Bucks County Coordinated Disaster Relief Fund, which has been set up to help our neighbors who have been badly affected by the recent severe storms with flooding and tornadoes. Operated by the United Way of Bucks County, in partnership with Penn Community Bank, the Coordinated Disaster Relief Fund launched with $35,000 in donations from the United Way, Penn Community Bank, and Dow. The fund will assist low-income homeowners impacted by the storms who are unable to secure aid from other sources. The nonprofit will coordinate with Bucks County and other nonprofit partners to ensure that funds are used efficiently. Now, Reverend Libby will give her sermon, The New Normal.
Thank you, Gil. I was reading this past spring an article from the May issue of the Anabaptist World magazine, which is the Mennonite equivalent of the Unitarian Universalist World. It's their denominational monthly magazine. And the author, Jenny Gaiman, started by quoting some very familiar lines. "Humpty Dumpty sat on a wall. Humpty Dumpty had a great fall." And you all know where it goes from there. All the king's horses and all the king's men couldn't put Humpty together again. Ms. Gaiman went on to reflect on the reality that we all go through experiences in our lives that make us feel like Humpty Dumpty, experiences that leave us upended, broken apart, even shattered. And the nursery rhyme jumps right to the question that we all tend to ask. How can we put it back together again? How can we get things back to normal? Too often, she writes, all we want, all we can conceive of is to be put back together the way we were before. We can't imagine anything else. But she points out we are often asking the wrong questions, whether we're talking about Humpty Dumpty or about our own lives. We can spend a lot of time and energy trying to glue all those little pieces back together. But even when that's possible, it's not always the best option. She quotes Father Richard Rohr, who says that the promise of faith, quote, is that something will be born of the ruin, something so astoundingly better than the present moment, we cannot imagine it. And then she says, while that sounds tremendously hopeful, especially in a year of so much breaking apart, it also lays bare a present problem: lack of imagination. I think the challenge for all of us as we stand in this liminal time, this in-between time, between what has been and what will be, the challenge for all of us is to start imagining. And that requires looking honestly at what has been and thinking creatively about what could be. Certainly the events of the past year have upended or even shattered our lives in countless ways. Many of us are struggling with what does life look like now? What should life look like now? We talk about getting back to normal as if that's a good thing. And there are parts of the old normal that would be wonderful to get back. But I'm seeing more and more articles urging me to think carefully and intentionally about what parts of that old normal I want back and what parts I don't want back. And I've begun thinking about what that looks like, both on an individual, personal level and within the larger communities within which much of our lives take place. And at first I thought that thinking about this on a personal level would be really easy. Okay, for example, I really missed having the extended family all together for the holidays, and I want that part back. Well, yes and no. I did miss it. But I didn't miss the stress and anxiety of having anywhere from 6 to 10 extra people in my home for 3 straight days. Maybe I want the family holiday back, but maybe I want to find a way to do it a little differently, a way that feels a little more manageable. And I just read an article from an old Atlantic about commuting, about how so many people who thought they hated their commute found that during the time they've been working from home, they really miss it. They miss that transitional time that lets them make the change in their mental state from being at work to being at home. It's a psychological break that they didn't realize they needed till they didn't have it anymore. So it's all turning out to be a little less simple than I thought. I have certainly missed seeing people's smiles. We've gotten back to more of that now, but I find again, as more people are being more cautious about masking indoors, the supermarket cashiers are back to wearing their masks. We don't have our friendly exchange of smiles anymore. I miss that. I'm still doing church virtually. I miss hugs. I miss the informal connecting time after a service. But on the other hand, during the heart of the pandemic, I really loved that I didn't have to make excuses to stay home when I really didn't feel like going out, because nobody was going out. I loved not having to worry about how my hair looked for a year and a half. Some of you remember the very short pixie that I had at the start of this pandemic. I could never have grown out all those little layers without this time where nothing really mattered. I liked being so much less busy. I liked consuming less and realizing how much I didn't need that I thought I needed in my day-to-day life. Now I realize that all of those things reflect the privilege that I have of being mostly retired, able to stay home and safe, and having the resources to be comfortable. For most people through this whole pandemic, they've had much more serious things to worry about than how their hair looked, or whether they had to accept an invitation to go out or not. For many people, the past year and a half has been filled with devastating losses and challenges in every area of their lives. But I still think that each of us can identify things we missed and maybe still miss bitterly that we long to reclaim just as they were. And we can identify other things about life before COVID that we don't miss. So what do we welcome back into our lives? And what do we let go of altogether? And what do we need to keep but transform into something new and different? It all calls for our imagination. It's not easy to imagine new ways of doing things, especially right now, because a lot of us are really tired. We may be very aware of what we don't want back from our old normal, but it's harder to find the energy to envision what we want to take its place. But that's the only way we'll change things. Once we begin to imagine how things could be, we can move forward towards something new, something better. And that makes it sound really simple, but of course it's not simple at all. It's hard, and it can be scary. Most of us resist change, even when it's in our own benefit, because change scares us. There's a reason why the phrase, "but we've always done it this way," carries so much power. I love that story about what you do with an idea. And I actually first learned that story here at Lower Bucks when our religious education director, who I can picture perfectly clearly and whose name I cannot call to mind, Jennifer, when Jennifer was our DRE. It was such a perfect and simple outline of the way we tend to respond to new ideas. Even when our imagination shows us these wonderful possibilities, we're likely to resist them at first and be really uncomfortable and tentative. I felt such a surge of recognition when our little narrator says, I tried to act like everything was the same as before my idea showed up. Oh, that is me all over. And maybe it's you too sometimes. You get an idea and you know it's going to change things, and you try to act like everything is the same as before it was before you got that idea. We worry about what people will think. We worry that our lives might get turned upside down. But that leads right to one of my favorite lines from the story. I liked being with my idea. It made me feel more alive, like I could do anything. It encouraged me to think big and then think bigger. It showed me how to walk on my hands because it said, it's good to have the ability to see things differently. During our long stretch of virtual worship, some folks have found it easier to come to church. Maybe because they have trouble leaving their homes. Maybe because they're just so much more comfortable in their pajamas. But virtual church opened up new possibilities. I know in my little Mennonite congregation, we had members coming to church who had not been able to come for quite a while, but now they could join us from their care homes. People who had just had surgery could join us. People who were sick, some of them who were sick with COVID, could come to church, could get some of the spiritual care and community connection that they needed when they needed it the most. And former members or adult members joined us from faraway places. On the other hand, virtual worship left some people behind, either because they didn't have the technology to connect or because they were so uncomfortable with the Zoom format. And while online worship in this Zoom format allowed us to see each other's faces clearly, so clearly, in fact, that one older member of my Mennonite church, who I think of as really being quite traditional, said we were having a virtual meeting to talk about when we might start coming back in person and what that might look like. And she said she didn't ever want to go back to sitting in the pews and looking at the backs of everybody's heads. She loved being able to see everyone's faces during the service. But virtual church has also made us more aware of needs that can only be met in person, and to appreciate more deeply things that we had taken completely for granted. I mean, one of those things for Mennonites is communal singing, which is absolutely central to worship. And that just, you may have tried it, it does not work on Zoom. You just get a cacophony when you try to do things in unison. But also the kind of casual connections that happen not just during coffee hour, but in the parking lot after coffee hour, where suddenly you continue that conversation that you thought was over. And of course, we all missed the hugs, the in-person connections, the handshakes, things that happen so naturally in person and that can feel so awkward online. I'd be happy to keep most of our evening meetings online, especially in the winter. But early this summer, I helped with an outdoor reception after a memorial service for a beloved member of our church. And I could not believe how much I had missed things like clearing tables and washing coffee pots with my fellow church ladies. It was helping in the kitchen that first made me feel like I belonged there. The connections that form in those informal work settings can't be reproduced in a format like this. And it felt so good to be back. And so we begin to dream up ideas. Why does it have to be either or? Why can't it be both and? Who are we trying to include in our community? How do we welcome the widest possible range of people? And what does that look like? What does worship really mean to us? What does congregational life mean? How can we reimagine church so that it makes the most of all of our possibilities and meets the greatest number of needs? The questions are endless. and it's time to ask them with depth and intentionality. I read an interview between Brene Brown and Priya Parker, and while it was too dense for me to process much of it for this sermon, one line just from Brene's introduction keeps ringing in my ears, and I've edited it slightly to make it family friendly. She said, "We're going to have to think about how we don't go back to doing some of the stuff that was just not working, that we were on autopilot doing because that's what we thought we were supposed to do." And I say, amen. Enough of that. Let's not do things just because we've always done them and it's what we think we're supposed to do. I think the last 18 months have disabled our autopilot. The time has come to think about things differently. And while some of that has been intensely painful, some of it has been really exciting. The key now is to give ourselves permission to experiment. Some ideas, like in the story, may seem kind of strange and fragile. But if we give them the attention they're asking for, and that line kept coming back in the story, it wanted a lot of attention. I gave it my attention. If we give these new ideas the attention they're asking for, they could lead us to some really interesting places. Brene Brown uses language when she's talking about these experimental phases. She talks about being in beta or being in the bounce. Beta versions, of course, are versions that are still being worked on. You're still working out the bugs. Being in the bounce means everything is still unpredictable. We don't know how we're going to rebound. We need to be okay with that. We need to give ourselves permission to experiment, to try things that might not work, to watch them fail and say, okay, that didn't work. What else should we try? To be in the bounce. But I think we also need to be prepared for how hard that will be. Even harder in our larger communities than it is in our personal lives. Because institutions, even more than individuals, resist change. Stephanie Spellers is an Episcopal priest who writes about change and growth in the church. And in her recent book, The Church Cracked Open, she writes, "Institutions and cultures are durable, partly because they obey the law of inertia. Even if you think you've exerted a strong external push and knocked a moving object or an entire institution off its set course, wait. Just wait. With barely a nudge, the object will drift right back to its original path." And then she goes on to say, think of your own experience. When you see a crack, what's your first instinct? Push the pieces back together and patch it over. Eventually, a contractor comes with the bad news. There is deep damage here, and if you don't address it before long, the whole structure will be fundamentally compromised. You sigh and negotiate. I don't know about you, but I have a surprising capacity to delude myself about how broken the structure is. With enough duct tape and rope, she says, I will get back to normal. It's Humpty Dumpty all over again. Just like Jenny Gaiman, Spellers is pointing out that our instinct is to try to put things back the way they were. But she suggests instead that we learn to welcome what she calls the unraveling, breaking, and cracking as a bearer of truth and even as a gift. We have seen a lot of unraveling and breaking and cracking. And now we need to look for the truths and the gifts that we find there. The pandemic highlighted in inescapable ways many of the inequities of our society. Income inequality, the brutal impact on communities of color, the lack of support for necessary but undervalued work, the increased burden on many working moms forced to choose between work and kids. The Black Lives Matter protests last summer brought growing awareness even among white folks who had previously been in denial that we have a deep and serious problem in our country with racism. There is a lot that is unraveling and breaking and cracking. And sometimes something old has to fall apart before something new can be born. Which brings me back to the article I quoted at the start of the sermon from Jenny Gaiman, who says, there is always the possibility that something new can be made of us, both individually and corporately. but we can't receive the new while longing for or clinging to the old. We can't receive the new while longing for or clinging to the old. Now, Jenny Gaiman writes from a Christian perspective, and she quotes Ronald Rolheiser from his book, The Holy Longing, where he makes a distinction between what he calls resuscitated life and resurrected life. Resuscitated life, he says, is when one is restored to one's former life and health. Resurrected life is not this. It is not the restoration of one's old life, but the reception of a radically new life. I think our instinct most of the time, for most of us, is to seek resuscitation, to seek to be restored back to the way we were. But that's not the path to transformation. That's going back, not forward. And while resuscitation may be good enough for some parts of our lives, personal or communal, other parts call out for resurrection. That's what Sonia Renee Taylor was talking about in the quotation I used for our reading this morning. We will not go back to normal. Normal never was. Our pre-corona existence was not normal, other than we normalized greed, inequity, exhaustion, depletion, extraction, disconnection, confusion, rage, hoarding, hate, and lack. We should not long to return, my friends. We are being given the opportunity to stitch a new garment, one that fits all of humanity and nature. That sounds so beautiful and so hopeful to me, but it will take a lot of imagination and a lot of courage. We'll need to get comfortable being uncomfortable. We'll have to welcome new ideas and listen to people whose voices have not always been heard. We'll have to let go of some of the old before we know what the new will be. We will have to accept that we can't receive the new while longing for or clinging to the old. Whether we look at our personal lives, our church community, or our wider society, we have the opportunity to stitch a new garment. May we have the courage and creativity and commitment to do it. Because in the words of the civil rights activist and icon Rosa Parks, we are not where we want to be. We are not where we are going to be, but we are not where we were. May we have the courage and commitment to move forward to a new normal.
Thank you, Libby. That was amazingly right on. We have such an opportunity in front of us, and hopefully we'll have the courage and the wisdom to make the best of it. Now is the time in our service when we recognize and lift up one another in love. Let us be fully present and listen with open hearts. If you wish to share a joy or a sorrow this morning, please go to the bottom of your computer screen and click on reactions, and then click raise hand. And this will help us find you and help you to unmute. And if you don't have a computer, you're using whatever, or if you just can't figure it out, there's a method we've used for thousands of years that'll work. So you can do that. For everyone's benefit, please be brief. Okay, there's
Joanna Steer.
Joanna Steer, you want to start out?
Sure. We have a joy in our household. Aaron is starting a new job tomorrow. He's going to take the train bright and early up to New York City to work at Reverend, which is a biotech startup up there, for his first day, his orientation. So
Wow.
we're excited for him.
That is fantastic. A new opportunity for you.
Okay, Bill and Jane.
Bill and Jane,
Give me a second.
we're going to,
Okay.
okay, go ahead and unmute Bill and Jane.
Yes.
I think you did. Go ahead.
We couldn't go to Star Island this year. We tried. We were registered, but we couldn't do it because of slight illness. But somebody that was there and let us connect with Star Island in person. And it's in the, maybe you don't know about Star Island, but it's a Unitarian Conference Center that we've been going to for a long time. But we were there for the chapel service, and it was in person. I mean, they were in person.
Yeah, we're live.
Yes.
Yeah.
And it was so wonderful that somebody took the effort to put us there. We were very happy, and that's new because we never did anything like that before.
That's great. You know, I've been hearing about Star Island for 20 years now. Hopefully someday I can make it there.
I hope so.
Okay.
Yes.
Hmm?
Yes.
Well, anyone else? Don't see anybody. We always, oh,
Wait, Joanna. All right.
Joanna.
So we didn't talk about announcing this, but we did offer our admin position to a wonderful and accomplished woman named Kathy, and she accepted our offer, and so we are in the process of getting the paperwork done, but things are changing, and her start date is tentatively going to be on November 1st.
Woohoo!
That is great news.
That is a great joy for everyone on the board and hopefully for the entire congregation.
A lot of us have been wearing more hats than usual lately, so that is great news. Well, whether you shared today or not, for your joys, we in this community join you in celebration. And for any sorrows or concerns, may you feel our sympathy and our compassion. Let's pause for just a moment of gratitude, silent meditation, and prayer. Our closing song is a beautiful song, and it was co-written by Avi.
On a bus in Alabama, Rosa paid her fare. She came upon a sign that said she couldn't sit there. And though her voice was weary, the driver heard her say, I know, we can find a better way. On a stage in San Francisco, as he stood before the crowd, Harvey showed us he could lead, honest, brave, and proud. And all across the city, the people heard him say, I know, we can find a better way, a better way, a better way. Together we can raise our voice and make a brand new day. If Rosa could and Harvey could, then surely we can too. A better way depends on me and you. As I sit here before you, I look at us all around. I feel that change is coming. The sound is getting loud. And now that I can hear it, I can add my voice to say, I know, I know, we can find a better way. I know, we can find a better way. I know, we can find a better way.
Thank you, Avi. That was really beautiful. Please feel free to join me as I read our closing words. We have basked in the warmth and beauty of this flame and this community. As the chalice flame is extinguished, let us carry its glow within. Let us kindle new sparks within these walls and beyond. Our service is concluded. You can now unmute yourself and chat and join in our coffee hour.